Launch of John Waldman's He Shoots, He Saves, the story of hockey's collectible treasures. Here to kick off the evening, please join me in welcoming your host, Geoff Kirbyson.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. This is going to be in the news business, you look for a hook on whatever you're doing that day. And the fact that we've got the biggest trade in new Winnipeg Jets history on the same day that John Waldman is launching He Shoots, He Saves is perfect. So John and I are going to have a little conversation in a minute here. I'll do an introduction first. Get that part out of the way. This is John's third book. And the other ones are up here also. Slam Wrestling, which obviously is some crazy stories about one of my favorite sports, wrestling. It's a sport. Got him, Need him, which is again about other memorabilia. And John has written for the Free Press, the Hockey News, and Beckett Magazine, which is a collectibles magazine. And right now, he's the Innovation and Communications Coordinator, make sure I got this right, at the Construction Safety Association of Manitoba. Right? Right, good stuff. So, without further ado, John, why don't we sit down and we'll talk about your new book.
Sounds good.
So we're going to do effectively just an interview, which is for me what I do every day. By the way, I work at the Free Press, and I've got a radio show, the smallest radio show on TSN called Sports Incorporated, which John is often a guest on. It's a half an hour a week, which is just like this much of. I dream one day of being, half of Gary Lawless. Sorry, that didn't sound the way.
I say you're right about that.
Yeah, I'm already half Gary Lawless. Okay, let's get going. John, why don't we just start off with, you grew up kind of as a kid who collected stuff. That's kind of the impetus for this book?
A lot of it, yeah. After publishing Got him, Need him, about 4 years ago already, my publisher came back to me and said, okay, we like the theme of the book, the idea of doing something in collectibles, which hasn't been done a lot in the book industry. And we sort of wanted to explore a couple ideas of what could be the next step. We knew that we wanted to go into the hockey realm just because we found that a lot more of the sales were coming from Canada, and we found that there was a lot of concentration with the ability to centralize on one sport, and naturally being a hockey fan from day one, this was the right way to go. So then it became a question of whether we focus in on a particular segment of the collectibles world, or if we just do sort of the general. So we decided that going the general way would be a little bit more enticing, so because everybody has that different touch point. When I was doing an interview with XM Radio, with the host brought up the stamps at Esso that he collected when he was a kid in the 70s. So that was his touch point for a lot of people my age. It was going into the basement of the Winnipeg Arena to collect autographs from the players, or collecting from McDonald's, things like that. So there were so many different areas that we decided to just take that more global route with the look and at what we were going to be featuring.
I wanted to yell at my mom when she threw out my huge collection of 7-Eleven Slurpee cups that were, it was all WHA days, and you get these obscure players on there, and it was awesome. And then she just decided that it was stupid having plastic cups in the cupboard. And I don't know what they're worth. They would have been worth now. It would have been worth like $11.
Yeah.
But you can still get them at Joe Daly's place.
Yeah.
Because I've already gone in there to research it. But John, what were some of the favorite things that you collected as a kid?
A lot of it was the autographs. I still have a lot of the autographs that I got from the guys like Thomas Steen, Tima Solani, Keith Kachuk. Maybe not Kachuk anymore, but a lot of the guys that I grew up watching. I had the very fortunate opportunity to meet a lot of them, both through the opportunities as a kid, and then later as I started to become more aware of the collecting world. And recognizing that having a puck signed by one of these guys or getting a photo taken with some of them later on would be something that I would definitely want to hold on to. And then after that, it was a little bit of everything. I like to dabble in getting some game-used pucks where I could, or game-used sticks, things like that, and then just some of the oddball things that have been produced over the years.
Like?
Aside from some of the figurines that were mass-produced, finding some of the real niches, or picking up the players that used to be on the table games or things like that. Some of the books, even some of the magazines that were advertised as the collector's editions, I always thought were kind of neat, and it sort of tied in also to what was my eventual pursuit in going into journalism. So for me, it was, being born with no arches in my feet. I was never a skater or anything like that. So for me, instead, it was learning how to analyze the game, learning how to watch the game with the critical eye, and taking that and then studying those. So a lot of the guys that were my heroes, as much as guys like Solani were the Ron McLeans, the Don Cherries, the Bob Coles, and those gentlemen, as much as anybody that was actually on the rink.
So I noticed you were taking a shot there effectively at your parents. We should point out that your parents, Denise and Arthur, are sitting here in the front row.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
And because if I was doing this, my parents would be sitting in the front row too, so I'm glad you guys are here. Here's one thing that is a little bit off topic, but this is what I think is the coolest collectible that anybody I know has. And a friend of mine, Doug McInnes, who is he works in the field, right? Mm-hmm. He's a rep with a couple different companies. And before they tore down the Winnipeg Arena, he went to Craig Heisinger and said, "What are you doing with the dressing room?" And he said, "We're blowing it up like the rest of the building." "Well, can I go in there and get a couple locker stalls?" I said, "Yeah." It was Tuesday. "Yeah, have at her. You got till Friday." So he pulled up there in his truck, took his toolbox, went into the dressing room, and had to drill through like 14 layers of paint, and deconstructed 2 locker stalls, including one in the corner one, and put them in his truck and rebuilt them in his basement. So you can walk in there. He's got all kinds of sticks and pucks and jerseys and helmets, and he's got Anders Hedberg's last jersey on display there, and he's got 1/15 or whatever of the Jets' original dressing room in his basement.
Wow.
And he never wanted that to be publicized. He was afraid that some freak was going to break into his house and steal it.
Well, that's the funny thing is that, because one of the things that a lot of the teams did, Montreal Forum, Boston Garden, when they were all taken down, pieces were sold off at auction, or bricks were sold intact. Winnipeg Arena, they sold off the seats, sold them off again, and then eventually just threw everything in a dumpster. When the arena was...
I paid $300 for my seats.
I think I paid $150 for mine, so we were the suckers. But they never did a brick auction. They never did the kind of things that would have benefited the True North Foundation or any number of charities in the city. And it was one of the things that to me was really unfortunate. Even after the implosion, you had just a lot of guys, myself included, who went in and just grabbed half bricks or whatever they could, just because there was no other way that we were going to be able to get it, and it was going to be shipped off sooner or later.
And yet, somehow, there are people out there who will buy the trough from Winnipeg Stadium. And did they sell the troughs from the Winnipeg Arena too?
I don't think they did.
I think a brick I could see buying, but I don't know the people who are buying these troughs are... What's a trough worth in the memorabilia market?
I don't know. I think it's at Market Burger now. I have no idea.
So, I was at the MTS Center today. You guys might have heard there was some activity down there today. And I wandered around. I wanted to see what was going on outside of the press release or the press room. And I was amazed at how many places there are pictures of Bogosian, Zach Bogosian, and Evander Kane, and often they're beside each other. So in the Exchange restaurant, their pictures are beside each other. In the foyer, or in the main concourse, they have players and then a continental player. So it's Kane, the Eagles, Bogosian. What do you think? And of course, if you want a jersey at the Jets gear store, well, they're half off today, and they're 75% off at River City, 50% off at Royal Sports.
Does that include the ones that were thrown on the ice, or?
Oh, I never thought about asking that. I think the one that was thrown in the ice was actually a T-shirt. It wasn't a full jersey.
Okay.
But what do you think happens with? I mean, there's lots of people out there who have items signed by Bogosian or by Kane. Now that they've been traded, what happens to the value of that stuff?
Effigies are quite popular. No, a lot of it does get blown out, and it's sort of interesting because you get some players, say like a Martin Brodeur, who at the end of their career will go to a new team like St. Louis Blues for all 4 or 5 games, and those are the collectibles that people start to go to because they've been around for so long. They've developed such a loyal fan base that'll follow them around no matter where they go. I mean, you even look at a guy like a Paul Coffey. Yes, a Hockey Hall of Famer, but played for 8 or 9 different teams. So you're really looking at a guy who, you know, is a collector going to want his things in Edmonton? Yeah. Is someone going to want something from Pittsburgh where he also wants a Stanley Cup? For sure. For a guy like a Kane or Bogosian, the Winnipeg interest is not going to sustain. I don't know what to expect in Buffalo. It's got a lot of history to it, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. But for at least for the interim, I mean, those are 2 guys that are not going to have a lot of sustained interest, especially Kane, given all the controversy that happens around him, and Bogosian, all the rumors that swirl around him and his often injured status no matter what. So he's the kind of guy that really is not, I don't think he's going to be able to sustain a lot of the interest that he had here.
So we all know what happened with Kane. What rumors are you talking about with Bogosian?
Just a lot of allegations that were floating around Twitter, just about his off-ice activities and things like that. There was a couple of calls into TSN about it earlier today. That's all I'll say about it. But he's somebody that, he's an interesting case because he was somebody that was very active in the Winnipeg community. He would often go to do autograph signings or get involved in community projects and things like that. So even when you're looking at a guy like, say, a Jim Slater, not somebody that the general community would flock to necessarily, but because of everything that he does in the community, he takes that extra step to really popularize himself to the audience by doing all these extra efforts. He's a guy that I think will have a little more sustained interest, even if he doesn't stay on past the signing the summer this year where he's a UFA.
I think too, the other thing that's too bad with Bogosian, in case you guys didn't know, I mean, you mentioned what he does. I mean, he won an award as the most philanthropic or active in the community. Jed, a couple years ago, he was the president of the Amadeus Steen Foundation, and he was often regularly seen signing autographs at the Children's Rehab Center and other hospitals. So he was great that way. And I wanted to bring for my bookmark tonight an autograph he had given my son, but I couldn't find it. So instead, I had to resort to my Veli-Pekka Katola card from 1974. Which is, I bet this is worth like $1 now.
Something like that, yeah.
I had a bunch of these as a kid, but they ended up in the spokes of my bike. So, what else do we want to talk about here? So, are there any, I mean, I don't know how many of you out there are collectors. Are most of you collectors? Or were you waiting for the next speaker, or is anybody here in the wrong room? So, what's out there? I mean, if those of us who are interested in this, you know, what's, you know, 30 or 40 years ago, it was you know, old peachy cards.
Yeah.
What's the thing that people are really getting into these days?
A lot of it is still the cards. It's still the base of a lot of the hobbies. That's where a lot of it gets started. It's easy to go and find a pack for $1 and start there. I mean, yes, they go up to $500, $600 for a single pack, but it's an easy entry point because you start to learn about the different players. You start to get, you know, some of those photos that are easily and still a little bit tangible. But getting autographs, getting packs are probably the next steps. Things that are easily acquirable through electronic means. You know, ordering a photo from the likes of from Joe Daly's store, or going into Superstars or something like that, and going and picking up an autograph is fairly easy. And then going through mail order or going to shows that a lot of the players go to. And then after that, you start to move into some of the higher stuff, like the game used pucks that the Jet store sells, or the jerseys, sticks, what have you. And then you do have a lot of the extra pieces, a lot of the specialized stuff that can be everything from framed art pieces to some of the more one-of-a-kind pieces that are out there. I think it was even, Birchwood that was renting the SUVs to the Jets, and what they ended up doing after that is they had the players sign when they sold off those SUVs. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's some really weird things that people have bought and sold, and they keep, based on the sales that keep going, you can see that it is popular.
What are the weirdest things you've heard of people buying and selling?
There's, in researching for the book, and especially in getting all the images, which sometimes can be a task and a half. There was one guy that I found in Burlington, Ontario, and I just found a couple of his auctions on eBay, and I said, you know, can I get a couple things from you? He said, yeah, I'll shoot you over some of my more interesting stuff. So as soon as someone says more interesting, I'm always curious. So what he had, aside from having some of the McDonald's sets, like the old cards, the miniature masks, and things like that, he had actually been able to get some of the old displays. So he had the counter displays, he had the panels that were up alongside the menus, things like that. So you start to see some of those interesting ones start to come up. There have also been some odd phenomenons that have come up over the years. Everybody remembers bobbleheads one way or another, that are now given out at the Jets games, etc. There was one that really was curious to me, though, where a company decided to make rubber ducks of NHL players, and I don't understand the concept behind it. They called them celebra ducks, so I'm guessing that they did them in other forms, movies and music, etc. But it was really bizarre to me that someone would actually do that as a concept and try to sell it, but sure enough, it actually sold.
And the Philadelphia Flyers had records back when they were Stanley Cup champions in the 70s too, right? Sort of like the early version of the Super Bowl shuffle.
A little bit of that, but what they did is they sold the audio from whoever the radio broadcaster was. They sold them as a recorded disc, and yeah, they had some Flyers tribute songs, the same way that the Jets had hockey rock albums in the 90s, and just some of those, or just some really bizarre stuff that has been created over the years. When you look at somebody like, say, the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, born out of the Disney era, there was a cartoon that's lasted for, I think, all of 20 episodes, but being Disney, they created little figurines of those same figures, including the Waldman mascot of the Anaheim Ducks.
I don't remember the Jets rock, but I remember the Blue Jays had an album, and one of the hit songs was Helpless Mookie. Remember that? It was done to a Beach Boys. It was the worst song of all time.
I'm sure that these Jets songs, I haven't heard them in a while, but I'm sure that they rival.
Yeah, maybe after the end we could sing a couple verses of Helpless Mookie.
I don't think McNally's staff would be that happy with that.
So now, you mentioned buying stuff online. There was a 3-part series that just aired on TSN a couple days ago about fakes, and I don't know if any of you saw that, but TSN, one of the reporters took a hidden camera and he went to a couple different shows. But beforehand, he asked some kind of a student of some kind to study the autographs of a bunch of different players, Johnny Bower and Ted Lindsay, and practice their autographs, and then sign a bunch of pictures and cards and pucks. And this guy took 17 or 18 items to these shows, and you go to these authenticators who will charge you a couple $100 to say, yes, that